The FBI. Can we save it? Should we save it? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has existed in one form or another for 114 years. Today, the Trump raid angers most of the American people, but excites the rest. But the very history of the FBI has created or exacerbated a problem since its beginnings. Every dirty, rotten thing the FBI has ever done, this month, has its roots in that 114-year history. Any attempt to salvage or reform the FBI must take account of that history. Furthermore, the American people must reckon with their deadly tendency to opt for easy fixes to admittedly vexing problems. Before we start, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views, link in the description. Be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of good merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I have chosen for today, which depicts Pluto telling us, no one is more hated than he who speaks the truth. And that is the truth. We start with the latest on the Trump raid and its aftermath. As everyone knows, South Florida Magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhart unsealed the search warrant the FBI used in the Trump raid. Now, that's not good enough for Donald Trump and his team, as they have made clear. They moved to unseal the supporting affidavit for the warrant. And on Thursday, August 18th, Judge Reinhart held a hearing. There, the FBI actually said the investigation was in its early stages, so that any release of information would tip off its targets. Now, with whom does the FBI want to convince the American public they are dealing? With a former president of the United States who lost but a narrow but spread out popular vote margin? Or with a dangerous gangster, or worse, a Latin American style dictator? At last report, Judge Reinhart has ordered the FBI to propose its own redactions to that affidavit. He wants that proposal by Thursday, August 25th. Trump will not settle even for that. He now announces that he will sue the FBI over violations of the Fourth Amendment. Though he won't say yet how he will challenge the search warrant, I can guess. He will allege that the FBI lacks probable cause. Better still, he might say the warrant violates the particular description clause. Now that strikes me as the more powerful argument, because that warrant looks less like an American-style search warrant and more like a British-style writ of assistance, which is a general, look anywhere and everywhere for anything and everything kind of warrant. But we hear of much more. Mr. Paul Sperry has posted on an alternative platform some disturbing questions about how the FBI got that warrant. Now, never mind the possible conflicts of interest Judge Reinhart might have. Sperry accuses the FBI of omitting exculpatory evidence in making the case to the judge. Now, exculpatory means evidence against blaming someone or accusing him of doing something wrong. Now, I quote, "Where is the May subpoena for Mar-a-Lago records? And where is the June inventory receipt the FBI would have given Trump lawyers, Corcoran and Bob, who voluntarily handed over docs from Trump's storage to investigators? Let's see those docs, along with the affidavit. And where is the June subpoena and inventory receipt the FBI would have furnished Trump's lawyers, who voluntarily handed over surveillance footage to investigators? Let's see those docs too. If these documents or references to them are missing from the affidavit for the August search warrant, then the FBI omitted exculpatory evidence of prior Trump cooperation from the court, which would be a fraud on the court, similar to the fraud on the FISA court the FBI committed in the Crossfire Hurricane case. Unquote, Paul Sperry. By the way, someone is leaking information at least once a day. Now, whoever's doing it says that the FBI told the judge that if they didn't seize the documents, Trump would soon destroy them. Never mind, of course, that Trump had them for 18 months. Ample time to destroy them if he intended to. We have known since shortly after the raid that the FBI was after information from the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. Obviously, that would discredit the Bureau. We now learn that the Trump raiders are the same agents from the Crossfire Hurricane team. Now, the team leader, Agent Peter Strzok, pronounced Strzok, is out. But his team is still around, and they were the very ones doing that raid. But Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio and others now tell us the FBI has serious problems in its own organization, and has had them even before the raid. In fact, they've had these problems for years, but arguably their current director, Christopher Wray, has made them worse. The Bureau has two kinds of problems that should concern everyone. First, they are running roughshod over Americans' liberties, and not merely those of Donald Trump. Second, the Bureau has fired some agents who object to these practices. So not only do we see agents saying we didn't sign on for this kind of nonsense, we also see a director effectively saying, okay, fine, there's the door, and don't let it hit you on the way out. And how do we know this? Because 14 FBI agents have told that story to Representative Jordan. I have a link in the description to an interview he gave on this subject. Now here's a sample of what he said. 14 FBI agents have come to our office as whistleblowers, and they are good people. There are lots of good people in the FBI. It's the top that is the problem. And he goes on. Some of these good agents are coming to us, telling us what's going on, the political nature now of the Justice Department, talking about the school board issue, about a whole host of issues. Unquote, Jim Jordan. Now, by school board issue, Representative Jordan means a memo from Attorney General Merrick Garland telling the FBI to treat parents who express concerns about public school curriculum and other woke policies as domestic terrorists. Representative Jordan goes on. He says, it's becoming a well-worn trail of agents who say this has got to stop. And thank goodness for them, and that American people recognize it, and I believe they're going to make a big change on November 8th, which of course is the date of midterms. But Director Wray has also been purging his bureau. Representative Jordan gives details in an angry letter to Wray. I have a link to it in the description, and I'm going to read it out loud to you right now. We continue to investigate allegations that the Federal Bureau of Investigation is retaliating against FBI employees for engaging in disfavored political speech. On May 6, 2022, we sent you a letter that detailed examples of the FBI suspending the security clearances of FBI employees for their participation in protected First Amendment activity. To date, you, Christopher Wray, have failed to acknowledge our letter or begin to arrange for the requested briefing. Since our May 6 letter, we have received new protected whistleblower disclosures that suggest that the FBI's actions are far more pervasive than previously known. Multiple whistleblowers have called it a purge of the FBI employees holding conservative views. As one example, the FBI targeted someone we'll call Agent Doe, who works in the FBI's whatever office, by suspending security clearances and eventually indefinitely suspending Agent Doe from duty and pay. Agent Doe had apparently shared personal views that the FBI was not being entirely forthcoming about the events of January 6th. As a result, the FBI determined that Agent Doe had espoused conspiratorial views and promoted unreliable information which indicates support for the events of January 6th, and therefore the FBI questioned Agent Doe's allegiance to the United States. Representative Jordan sent that letter in June. The FBI detailed original Crossfire Hurricane agents to raid Trump's house in August. So what's going on? That letter, the better question is, how long has this sort of thing been going on? Answer, almost since the Bureau's founding. Before I get to the history of the FBI, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor, oursilverlines.com. You feel like you're working hard for your money just to get by? You're not alone. The fluctuating economy, employment issues, and unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the past few years. Collecting gold and silver coin can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting wealth by collecting precious metals. Whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities that company provides, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Now, contrary to popular belief, the FBI did not begin as a response to the notorious 1929 St. Valentine's Day Massacre. I have a link in the description to the very catchy main title of the 1967 movie about that event, in case you're interested. The point is that the FBI didn't even get its current name until 6 years after that event, but its history goes back to 1908. The FBI has lightly sanitized that history and carries it no further than 2014, but one can trace its beginnings and the jurisdiction creep that let it grow to the Bureau we know today. This jurisdiction creep has several milestones. 1910, the White Slave Traffic Act, or Mann Act, creating a category of interstate crime. 1917, the Espionage Act, 2 months after American entry into the First World War. 1919, the Motor Vehicle Theft Act, or Dyer Act, making interstate transportation of stolen motor vehicles a federal beef. Aficionados of the Quinn Martin TV show The FBI will remember that interstate transportation of stolen property of any kind is now a federal beef. 1924, the future FBI gains its Identification Division in the same year that J. Edgar Hoover became acting and then permanent director of what was then called the Bureau of Investigation. 1932, the Federal Kidnapping Act. This was a response to the Lindbergh kidnapping. It granted the Bureau jurisdiction the minute any kidnapper transported his hostage across state lines. 1934, Bureau agents gained the first direct power of arrest and authority to carry weapons. And in that year, Bureau agents scored their first kill, John Dillinger. 1935, the FBI gets its current name. And from 1934 to 1975, the FBI occupied space in the Justice Department's headquarters in Washington, D.C. 1939, the FBI starts investigating subversive activities in addition to espionage and sabotage. 1940, the 6-year history of the Special Intelligence Service begins. Though President Harry S. Truman closed it in 1946, it set the precedent for stationing FBI agents overseas. And also in that year, the Bureau set up its disaster squad, which is not a law enforcement function. 1946, the Atomic Energy Act, giving the FBI authority over nuclear secrets. Note that this is part of the beef with Trump. 1947, Executive Order 9835, setting up the Federal Employee Loyalty Program. Oh boy, chew on that for a while. 1950, the first list of the 10 most wanted fugitives. Now, the actor Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. would occasionally spotlight one such fugitive after an episode of the Quinn Martin TV show. Angela Davis drew the dubious distinction of having the actor mention her name in this context. 1956 to 1971, COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program. I have a link in the description to the landing page. 1967, creation of the National Crime Information Center, the NCIC. 1968, Public Law 90-351, link in the description, specifying, among other things, presidential appointments of FBI directors. 1970, the Organized Crime Control Act and the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act. 1972, the death of J. Edgar Hoover. 1973, the year of 3 directors. 1975, the FBI gets its own headquarters. After also the Second Battle of Wounded Knee. 1981, Abscam. 1983, a hostage rescue team. Now, the FBI has many more milestones, but these are the most important. They set the precedents for the things the Bureau does today, and much of this is likely extra-constitutional. The Constitution grants a limited set of law enforcement powers to Congress. Article 1, Section 8 reads, in relevant part, the Congress shall have the power to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States, to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square as may, by cession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of the government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings, and to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. Now, this included prohibition from 1918 through 1934. So, it would seem that the only legitimate federal beef within the states is minting or printing counterfeit coin, currency, bonds, or the like. Where does the Constitution grant jurisdiction over bank robbery, or kidnapping, or even interstate transportation of stolen motor vehicles or other property? Anything of the kind happening in an Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 place would certainly be a federal beef. So also would be a crime in a federal territory, not within a state. Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, the Needful Rules and Regulations Clause, makes that clear. Next, the Crime on the High Seas Clause defines federal jurisdiction over piracy and any felonies in which a U.S. national is either victim or suspect. Last of all, the power to define and enforce secrets derives from the power and directive to provide for the common defense. So, Because the federal government has secrets, it must have an agency to guard those secrets. So, the FBI does have legitimate purposes, but it's a problem. Congress began to extend the jurisdiction beyond what the Constitution provides, and lately the FBI has taken certain matters upon itself. The worst complaint against the FBI is the conduct of the current director regarding the January 6th event. From two separate sources, we learned that the FBI had 20 assets embedded in the Trump rally crowd. At least one person refused recruitment as an informant, and he is now languishing in a Florida prison for his trouble. So, the FBI has two problems. First, although it has some constitutionally legitimate functions, it has an expanded and extra-constitutional brief as well. Second, Director Christopher Wray has politicized his agency in a manner that ought to shock every American. Friends of Liberty must contend with two sad facts. First, this is one of the worst mistaken appointments Donald Trump made. Second, too many Americans, or shall we call them Americans in name only, actually support Wray in his campaign to turn the agency into a kind of federal woke police. The mainstream media, for their part, prefer to ignore the extra-constitutional nature of the FBI's expansive mission. Boogeyman, cries Emily Brooks of The Hill. She forgets, of course, that a diagnosis of paranoia, paranoid neurosis, or paranoid anything becomes untenable once the subject can show a clear and convincing basis in fact for the assertions that those applying that diagnosis wish to belittle. So, where do we go from here? One thing must happen in any case. Christopher Wray must leave his office. He rates removal as swiftly as possible. Donald Trump, once he becomes president again, can remove him. Failing that, Congress can remove him through impeachment. After that, the president needs to dismiss from federal service anyone at any level who has taken part in false flag pseudo operations and violations of people's First, Second, and Fourth Amendment rights and any other rights they enjoy under the Constitution. Next, Congress should limit the FBI to strictly constitutional functions. Now, that means the guarding of official secrets subject to the president's authority to reveal them. It also means investigating crimes that take place in Washington, D.C. and all other Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 places, and B, take place on the high seas, meaning piracy and felonies only. If the American people feel the need to retain jurisdiction of the FBI over kidnap, Mann Act offenses, and the like, we should formally amend the Constitution and do it right. Then we transfer all remaining functions to federations of state and local law enforcement agencies or to private detective agencies. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. For 114 years, the American people have failed in that vigilance. Limitation and reform of this rogue agency will be painful, but limit and reform it we must. Link in the description to the article, to the interview with Congressman Jordan, to Jordan's angry letter to Christopher Wray, to the St. Valentine's Day Massacre main titles, to the FBI timeline and COINTELPRO landing page, to Public Law 90-351, and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and to oursilverlines.com, as I also mentioned. And if you like what you've heard, you can like this video. And on the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link, a link to that St. Valentine's Day Massacre main title, and to two other videos that I will select talking about the Trump raid and what is wrong with and in the FBI. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.